Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Millions turned out to vote Monday in Zimbabwe's historic close-run election. Today we ask what's next for the country post-Mugabe.
So tweet us, comment in the live YouTube chat, and you too could be in the stream. On Monday, Zimbabweans voted in the country's first election since former President Robert Mugabe was forced from power last year. Without Mugabe's name on the ballot, voters had to choose from a field of 23 candidates, including the two front-runners. Incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa faced a tough challenge from Nelson Chamisa of the Opposition Movement for Democratic Change, or MDC. Mnangagwa of the ZANU-PF has been president since the military toppled Mugabe in a bloodless coup.
Well, joining us to talk about the election and what's next for Zimbabwe, in Harare, Linda Sibagnoni. She's an independent who ran for parliament to represent the Harare East constituency. Duduzile Nirango, she's also an independent who ran for a local council seat. Tawanda Chimhini, he's the executive director of the Election Resource Center. That's a think tank and advocacy organization on electoral and democracy issues in Zimbabwe. In Johannesburg, South Africa, Tafi Maka, he's a social and political commentator with a special focus on Zimbabwe. And John Dramani Mahama, he's the former president of Ghana and is the head of the Commonwealth Observer Group, one of the organizations monitoring Zimbabwe's elections. Welcome everyone to the stream. Mr. President, I want to start with you because we tweeted out to our community of viewers that you'd be on the show with your eye on the Zimbabwean elections. And here are two accounts we got back. Tina here says the actual voting, the casting of ballots, was very peaceful and there was no recorded incident in my area. On the other hand, we got this from Joe Black, Zimbabwe, who says a whole polling station went missing in Goromanzi, and the Electoral Commission is failing or refusing to post result forms at a fifth of polling stations. Is there any practical action that you, Mr. President, can take, or shall it barely be mentioned under irregularities as usual? From your initial assessment, what is your take on how the voting has gone?
The observation of voting can be categorized into three distinct parts. The period before the election, whether there is a level playing field and people have the opportunity to be able to campaign and take their message to the people. The next part is voting day, actually, where people come out to vote. Are the polling stations laid out well? Are they accessible? Are people able to cast their votes in secret? And how did the counting go? And then the third part is after voting, and that is the tallying of the results. We gave our arrival interview, which was based on reports that we had picked up from our pre-assessment team, but we also spoke to all the stakeholders. And in the arrival interview, we indicated what our thoughts were about the environment before the election. All the political parties told us that they had been free to canvass votes from across the country. It was unlike previous elections where there were no-go areas where some political parties could not go into certain areas of Zimbabwe. And so with access to campaigning, I think that the political parties expressed satisfaction.
So, Mr. President, let me share this with you, if I may, because I was on your Twitter feed here, and here you're pictured talking to people. What's the atmosphere like? Because there's a certain amount of what you're doing which is rote and by the numbers, but you're meeting people out in Zimbabwe. What was the atmosphere like? What did you feel about this election?
The atmosphere was one of enthusiasm. Everywhere I went to all the polling stations, I took the opportunity to speak to the voters who were queued up and asking what their expectations were. And I must commend Zimbabweans. They came out in their numbers. We don't have the official turnout yet, but they stood in queues. In some cases, the queues were quite long, but they had the patience to stand in the queues and wait till their turn to cast their votes. And so it was a very enthusiastic atmosphere. People were keen to vote and make their voices heard.
All right. President Dlamini Mahama, thank you very much for joining us to talk about what it is like to be chair of the Commonwealth Group of Observers currently working in Zimbabwe right now. Thank you, Mr. President, for joining us. Dudu, people were voting for you. What was it like for you knowing that this election, this historic election, that it was a little different from any other election in your lifetime?
Well, I was feeling excited that there are actually people who believed in me, who actually voted for me, even if I did not win the election. And the excitement was, everyone was just feeling like this is the time for change. And this was like a new election after 37 years of Mugabe's rule. And it was like starting all over again.
Let me show you this. This I found on your Twitter feed, and it's from Kundai. And Kundai says, "We are not defined by the things that don't go our way. I admire your courage and hard work. You fought a good fight. Take the disappointments and work on them." And basically, you are one of the people who know that you didn't win. You didn't get the office that you ran for, local government office. And she's saying, don't give up. The number of young people who actually were in contention, what does that say about Zimbabwe right now?
There were a lot of young people, because I think young people decided to be the change, decided to step up and started to be the leaders because they are the next generation and they decided to take destiny into their own hands. So the young people now feel like it's time for them to participate in the governance processes, in the politics of the country, and to be the change and to bring development and change in the country.
Taffy, I'm just looking here for Al Jazeera's rundown of the Zimbabwe elections 2018, voting at a glance. The registered voters, the 23 presidential candidates. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I think it was a much freer environment than it was in previous elections. And I think that created a lot of optimism around this electoral process. But I still feel that the election was not entirely free and fair. I think the voting was fairly peaceful. I think the campaigns were done in a very optimal environment, but I don't think the process in itself was entirely free or fair. I think everything was tilted towards ZANU-PF and the government.
Linda, you're in contention. You were trying to get a parliamentary seat. What Taffy says there is like, he's not convinced that this was a free and fair election. From your perspective, how did it go?
As a candidate, I have a totally different experience. I actually believe it was free and fair. I ran my race, I put my best foot forward, and I accept the results that came through. I can't fault ZEC. According to me, on the ground as a candidate, the process has been actually very transparent from a candidate's point of view.
So I hear that point, and I think that a lot of people online agree with you, but then there is this sentiment from a couple people. Why is it taking so long for Zimbabwe and the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission to release the results? So I'll share two things here from the candidates, two of them themselves, Nelson Chamisa. Winning resoundingly, we now have results from the majority of the over 10,000 polling stations. This was as of July 30th. We've done exceedingly well. We're awaiting the Electoral Commission to perform their constitutional duty to officially announce the people's election results, and we're ready to form the next government. Of course, the incumbent, though, is also tweeting, "Patience is a virtue." You can see it in several of his tweets here, Emmerson Mnangagwa. Tawanda, I'm wondering if you can answer our original tweeter's question on why it's taking so long, and is that something that's unusual?
No, definitely it's something that we are worried about as observers to the election process. Ordinarily, I think 24 hours after polling day, you'd expect the Election Commission to have managed to collect all election results and at least have had them getting transmitted to the National Tally Center. This appears to not have happened, and the question is, what's going on? And we've been raising this with the Electoral Commission. So now, as we speak, the Electoral Commission has been issuing out results for House of Assembly elections. And our argument to them has been that these results have already been declared at the constituency center, why not just proceed to announce the presidential results which have not yet been declared, rather than repeating to announce results that that have already been declared anyway. So it's a bit worrying. Our regulations in terms of how elections should be handled, election results should be handled, are quite clear. When results move from the polling station to the ward collection center and to the constituency center, they are declared at the appropriate levels. And when they get to the national center, what should happen is that the presidential results should be the ones that are declared at that level. We have not yet seen this. Of course, we've got 5 days to announce the results. But given the experience in 2013, by this time, a lot of the results would have been announced. So this is something that we are a bit worried about. We think it raises questions around transparency and accountability on the part of the Election Commission, since not much information has been given in terms of what is going on. So the danger of not concluding the announcement of results is that it raises tensions and people ultimately get worried about what's going on. Suspicions are raised, and we definitely would want to hear the Election Commission allay fears so that people can be calm ultimately, so that the post-election period is characterized by tranquility, by peaceful coexistence, and so on. This is what we want at the end of the day, and we hope we'll get answers from the Electoral Commission.
Taffy?
Yeah. Just to add on to what Tawanda said, I think there's so many things that the MDC Alliance, for example, asked for before the election from ZEC, during the election and after the election. And I think what we've pretty much seen is that ZEC has not been responding positively to many of the things that have been brought up by the MDC Alliance. So when I, for example, speak of an election not being free and fair, I'm looking at very critical points, as in how the votes are counted. But even more, before the election, I'm looking at the state media was biased towards ZANU-PF and government, which has been the case since 1980. And definitely there was an issue where throughout the campaign, both Mnangagwa and Chiwenga used the power of incumbency to the maximum and created a situation where you couldn't really tell the difference between government and party functions and things of that nature. So I think fundamentally this election looks free and fair, but I think when all the results have been released and we look back on everything, there might be a lot of critical things that actually might have helped the incumbent to stay in power if he does manage.
Malika?
I want to bring up this perspective. This is from Sidibe on Twitter. And he's referencing something that a lot of people are referencing, that we can't even talk about this election without talking about former President Mugabe. Sidibe says, whoever emerges the new president of Zimbabwe will have Mugabe's shadow to bury first. A new Zimbabwe isn't possible without peeling Mugabe's claws from the country. So some strong words there, Juduzele. But do you think that this is a fair point?
I think he's right in some sense, because remember, there's Mugabe the person and then there's Mugabe the system. So for me, I believe that the system has been there for 38 years and it's the one that has been causing all these things. And that system has to be let go. We let go of that system so that we can start afresh. So that system has been affecting us in our country. So that system is deeply rooted and it has to be totally done off with if we're to progress as a country.
Dudu, this is something that you shared earlier with people who follow you on Twitter. Congratulations, Mr. President. Are you calling the election right now? Tawanda's already said the results are delayed. This smacks of maybe not being too transparent. And here you are. Is this not mischief making in such an important election?
Okay, so I'm just saying congratulations on the achievement of him running this election. Not necessarily.
But you called, so Mr. President, what, that's your nickname for him? What is that?
Oh, he's the president for a party. So
okay.
Okay.
All right. So, I mean, this is one of the things that I'm thinking about, Linda, about this idea of Chamisa and Mnangagwa, these two very prominent leaders and front runners. If one of them wins and the other one doesn't say, OK, I agree, you've won, is that a concern that Zimbabweans have right now?
Yeah, obviously. If one does not concede, if you do not concede an election, obviously tensions will rise, and we do not know which way it could go. But at the end of the day, if one does not concede, it's the citizens who suffer, honestly.
So there's this idea also about the momentum of the MDC and being pushed along, Taffy. How would you like to unpack that a little bit for us?
You said being
the momentum along? Of the MDC, where Chamisa is, well, we're doing really well right now. The MDC is doing really well.
Yeah, the problem is we don't have official results, but I can understand where he's coming from. He went into this with a lot of momentum, as you said there, and he feels he's close to victory. But I think the problem is he entered the election knowing that there were a lot of things that could go against him, and I mean, we can't say for sure that anything untoward has been done as yet. But I think the longer the results, the longer it takes ZEC to announce the results, the stronger the suspicion that it might be slipping away from Chamisa will grow. So I think he's trying to keep people, hyped up, and probably in the mode where, if necessary, they can go out on the streets to defend what they feel was their vote to win. So I think that's the situation we're in right now.
And what it is that they are defending for so many people is bigger than just who wins, but the policies that then will be enacted. So when asking our community, what is it that you want the president to tackle when they get into office? We got several comments that look like this. Plaxton says, tackle the economy and create jobs. Another person sent us a video comment with what is most important to them and for them. This is Hillary, who's a Zimbabwean researcher based in South Africa now, and this is what he told the stream.
There is no youth voter apathy to talk about in the 2018 elections in Zimbabwe, because 60% of the registered voters were aged between 18 and 40, and with a 75% voter turnout, that makes young people the game changers in these elections. The young people have voted, they have decided who they want to be led with for the next 5 years. And to that leader, they are asking for access to means of production, access to capital, access to land for housing and for farming purposes.
Taffy, what do you make of that comment?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with him. I think this election, or perhaps the two parties, I think ZANU-PF symbolizes a more conservative view of Zimbabwe, and the MDC alliance symbolizes a more youthful, perhaps progressive view of Zimbabwe. And I think many urban youth, I'm not sure about rural youths, but I think many urban youth have been drawn towards the MDC alliance because I think they've never really experienced a Zimbabwe that is not in economic turmoil. This crisis that we have, for example, has been running for close to 20 years. And if you're 18, for example, you were born smack in the middle of a crisis, and you're still living with it up to now. So I think a lot of young people putting their hopes in Chamisa, introducing some sort of new dispensation that is way different from the current Zimbabwe that we know. Because the last time Zimbabwe had a strong economy, for all intents and purposes, was 1997. So you can understand the divide there is between the young and the middle-aged or the elderly.
You spoke the words. One of our YouTube commenters is thinking almost exactly Abbas here, tweeting being on YouTube, writing and saying, I would love to see Chamisa get elected because of him being relatively younger and then more relatable to the public. Duduzele, Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. Our population is mainly young people, and Chamisa is the young president who would actually relate with us because it's us, the generation that is the majority of the population, and we're the ones that have been suffering the most, and we're seeing him as an agent of change, one who's able to address the issues that we're facing as young people because he's also young.
Linda, the economy is so important. It's something that you as a businesswoman really appreciate. Now, whether you're in Parliament or not in Parliament, how do you feel that the next administration should be tackling issues about the economy and wealth in Zimbabwe?
We need a president who works hard, and we need a president who has, or rather is keen to re-engage the communities, international communities we had been previously shut out from. So with regards to the economy, we need to get back to production. Once upon a time tweeted that we need a president who's willing to be a villain for a short while, literally shut down Zim for a bit and ask us to pull our sleeves up and work for Zim.
This has been an exhausting campaign for you. I can tell just from some of the energy that you put into it, that you poured into it. I want to show your stub page here, your campaigning stub page, when you were fresh and ready for the fight. How are you doing now?
Exhausted.
You're exhausted. You know what? I'm feeling the exhaustion from you and also from Dudu. But what are you going to do with that exhaustion?
For me right now, I decided to take a break today, and I'm taking my loss by the chin. I'm going back full-time into business and looking forward to some of the projects that I'd been working on that I didn't have time to work on in the last 9 months. So I'm really looking forward to that, honestly, yeah.
And Dudu, what about you? Next steps, because what happens in Zimbabwe, it can't just be left to the politicians. It's not just their job to remake Zimbabwe.
Well, a better Zimbabwe is supposed to be built by everybody. I'm going to play my part in building a better Zimbabwe. My losing the election doesn't mean I have to stop doing whatever I can to see Zimbabwe getting to that place that we want to see it. But at the moment, I'm taking a break. I'm also going, because I'm also doing my businesses, some projects that I have, and I'm also doing an MBA. So I need to really concentrate on that. And I'm also going to do some community development projects in the local community that I reside in, which I had planned to do whether I win or not the election.
I hate to go from such a hopeful note on the positive things that are going to happen in your life and for the country because of you with this tweet, but there are a couple of people who are bringing this topic up. Tawanda, Dr. Welles on Twitter says, the greatest fear is one not accepting defeat and then throwing our country into a crisis again. In the last couple of minutes of our show, Tawanda, is this one of the fears that you share, or do you think it's not valid?
Definitely, I think it's a fear that is there, especially given the quality of the election process as we have seen it so far. One of the reasons why we continue to say that we need to have a credible election process, which is concluded in a manner that is acceptable to all, is that you would want to really limit potential areas of dispute around the election process, which will then raise the question of acceptability of the results. Now, in spite of the fact that we've said the country has been peaceful in the lead up to this election, there's no doubt that there's been massive polarization.
Yeah.
And any misunderstanding regarding how the election process has been conducted has the potential to trigger what we have seen in previous elections in Zimbabwe. And this is one of our greatest fears. Hence our insistence to the Election Commission that they need to exercise a lot of transparency and accountability in the administration of the outstanding election issues.
All right, Tawanda, that seems a very reasonable place to end our conversation for now. So Linda and Tawanda and Dudu and Taffy, thank you very much for being part of the program. And earlier on, we had President John Dlamini Mahama from the Commonwealth Group of Observers. Thank you for watching. Malik and I will see you online. We're always on Twitter @AJStream. See you next time.